At the Canal Company's quarterly meeting, Lydia Bell laid out the missing receipts one by one and proved that senior partners had been moving money through false freight accounts. She had copied each number twice, once in her narrow working hand and once in the clean copperplate expected in the boardroom. 12 barges had supposedly carried coal from pits that had been closed since spring. Wharfage had been charged on Sundays when the locks were chained. 3 payments bore the signatures of men Lydia knew were dead. For 7 years, she had kept the Rookwater Navigation and Carriage Company's books so accurately that Edmund Vane called her his little metronome. That morning, before 24 shareholders, he called her a thief. Miss Bell alone entered these figures, he said, laying one hand upon the ledger as if taking an oath. His dark coat was faultless, his voice almost regretful. We had hoped to spare her family the disgrace. The lie was prepared too well to be sudden. Martin Price, the company cashier, produced a page initialed in Lydia's hand. A bank clerk remembered receiving sealed packets from her. The packets had always come from Vane's office, but the clerk looked down when Lydia said so. Even Alderman Say, who had praised her arithmetic at Christmas, studied the ceiling. Lydia reached for the final ledger, the one containing the clearing accounts, and found that it had been removed from the table. "Ask Mr. Vane where folio 207 has gone," she said. Vane's expression did not change. A guilty person often invents a missing document. By noon, her wages were withheld, her references cancelled, and her name posted at every company office between Rookwater and Shrewsbury. The company cottage went with the position. She was permitted 1 hour to collect her clothes and her mother's medicine. Sarah Bell sat beside the cold grate, while Lydia folded dresses into a carpet bag. At 56, she still sewed the finest buttonholes in the county, though a winter cough had narrowed her shoulders. She did not ask whether the accusation was true. She asked how much money remained. 11 shillings and 4pence. Then we shall not waste 6pence on despair. Lydia tried to smile. The company had not merely taken her livelihood. It had used the precision on which she had built her life as proof against her. Since childhood, she had believed that a balanced column could defend the truth more faithfully than any wealthy man. Now the columns belonged to Vane. A knock sounded before they had finished packing. The visitor was Josiah Fenn, a solicitor with rain on his shoulders and a leather tube under his arm. He had handled the estate of Tobias Bell, Lydia's uncle, who had died 3 weeks earlier without wife or child. Tobias had owned Bracken Wharf, a disused warehouse on the abandoned upper cut of the canal. Lydia had not seen him in 12 years. "He left the freehold to you," Fenn said, "along with its contents and access rights, such as they may be." Sarah turned from the grate. "Tobias left it to Lydia." Fenn unrolled a survey and a list of liabilities. The roof leaked. The west wall had shifted, parish rates were overdue, and a mortgage of £48 would mature on the last day of November. Its holder was the Rookwater Navigation and Carriage Company. "Mr. Vane has already offered to accept the property in satisfaction of the debt," Fenn said quietly. "He sent the proposal to my office before the meeting ended." The speed of it made Lydia look again at the survey. Bracken Wharf was worth less than the mortgage, unless someone wanted the land beneath it. Vane had arranged her ruin and his purchase on the same morning. Fenn also delivered a note in Tobias's blunt hand. Lydia expected an apology for years of silence. There was only one sentence: "You were always the one who knew when a column had been made to lie." Sarah could stay temporarily with an old sewing customer. Lydia could sign Vane's conveyance, pay their lodging for several months, and perhaps obtain a clerk's position after the scandal faded. Or she could take possession of a ruin that might collapse before the mortgage came due. She rolled the survey into its tube. "Tell Mr. Vane I will inspect my inheritance before I decide what it is worth." Bracken Wharf stood 2 miles beyond the last working lock, where the upper cut narrowed beneath alder branches and vanished into reeds. Lydia arrived the following morning in a hired cart, carrying her carpet bag, her father's brass ruler, and the small cash book she had bought with her last threepence. Mist lay low over the water. The warehouse emerged from it by degrees. Black brick, blind windows, a roof sagging like a tired back, and one loading crane frozen above the bank. Nettles covered the towpath. 2 roof slates fell while she watched. The warped double doors required both hands and one shoulder to open, releasing a smell of wet timber, old grain, and canal mud. Inside, grey light crossed a loading floor, strewn with plaster. The counting office retained half its ceiling and a rusted stove. Someone had removed every chair, but left a high desk too heavy to carry. Lydia found Tobias's keys in its drawer, beside a carpenter's pencil worn flat by use. Beneath them lay 3 warehouse ledgers wrapped in oilcloth. The newest ended in 1878, 5 years before the wharf closed. Its entries were ordinary: rope, lamp oil, oats, storage, until a vessel's name began to recur every quarter in the same severe hand. Mercy Bell, winter berth, £12. Mercy Bell, tank repair, £4.6. Mercy Bell, storage, west covered basin, £12. Lydia read the name through twice. No vessel called Mercy Bell appeared in any Rookwater toll book she had balanced. Yet the charges continued for 17 years, regular as interest, even after the upper cut had been declared unnavigable. Behind her, a floorboard creaked. A broad man in a patched boatman's coat stood inside the doorway with an adze resting against one shoulder. "If you are Miss Bell," he said, "you should step away from that desk. The beam above it has been thinking about murder since Michaelmas." His name was Jonah Rees. He rented the cottage across the cut and earned what he could, repairing lock gates and narrowboats. Tobias had once paid him for occasional work, although not, he added, with any regularity. Lydia moved just before a clot of plaster struck the place where she had been standing. "Mr. Vane sent men yesterday," Jonah said, "measured the frontage, said the place would be down by Christmas." "It is not his to demolish." "Not yet." Jonah glanced at her neat gloves, then at the leaking roof. "You have money for 3,000 slates?" "I have 9 shillings. He gave a short laugh without cruelty. "Then begin with a bucket." Lydia disliked him for being right. They spent the morning making one corner survivable. She paid him 1 shilling to inspect the roof and another to help move the desk beneath sound joists. He refused a third for lending her a brazier, saying he did not charge people for failing to freeze. By dusk, the office had a canvas patch overhead, a door that closed, and a narrow bed made from sacking stretched across packing crates. The warehouse itself resisted every attempt to understand it. The county survey gave an exterior width of 52 feet. Tobias's inventory described a 40-foot loading room and a 6-foot counting office, allowing for 2 brick walls. 6 feet had disappeared. Lydia measured again with her father's ruler and a length of cord. The missing space ran along the western side, where shelving covered a soot-darkened wall. Near the loading doors, rainwater had spread across the floor in shallow mirrors, yet a straight band of dust remained dry from the western wall to an iron mooring ring set into the bricks. The ring stood 15 feet from the present edge of the canal, too far inland for any boat to use. When Lydia swept the dust aside, she found parallel grooves in the stone beneath it, each polished by repeated weight. They resembled the tracks left by warehouse dollies, but they ran directly into the wall. That evening, she carried the Mercy Bell ledger to the brazier. The quarterly £12 charge appeared 68 times. Not once did it vary for the length of a winter, the price of coal, or the condition of the canal. Storage did not behave that way. Interest did. She wrote 68 payments in her cash book, grouped them by year, and calculated backward. £12 each quarter was 4% annually on a principal sum of £1,200. A workers' fund of that size had vanished from the company books in 1861, the year her father, Stephen Bell, had been dismissed for an alleged shortage he denied until his death. Lydia looked at the bricked wall. Tobias had not left her a warehouse. He had left her an accusation built in brick. Morning brought Mr. Vane in a polished carriage, unsuited to the rutted towpath. He entered without knocking, accompanied by Martin Price and a young clerk carrying a deed box. The warehouse seemed to diminish around Vane's clean cuffs. "Miss Bell, this is an unwise performance," he said. "Your mother needs a proper room, and you require a chance to begin again. Sign the conveyance, and the mortgage disappears." Lydia closed Tobias's ledger before he could see the page. "Why does a worthless building interest you?" "The company may reopen the upper cut. There has been no appropriation for it." For the first time, Price's eyes moved toward the western wall. It was a small motion, but Lydia had spent 7 years observing men who wished numbers not to be noticed. Vane placed the conveyance on the desk. He offered £60 above the debt, provided Lydia withdrew her accusation and signed a statement acknowledging errors in her work. The money would support Sarah for a year. Lydia's hand rested on the paper long enough for Vane to mistake thought for surrender. "You prepared this before dismissing me," she said. "That means the warehouse mattered before I found the ledger." She pushed the document back. Vane's civility thinned. At the end of November, sentiment will not stop a lawful sale. After the carriage departed, Jonah emerged from behind the loading crane. He had heard enough to revise his opinion of her from foolish to inconvenient. Neither judgment was affection, but he agreed to examine the west wall in exchange for Lydia keeping accounts for his repair work during the winter. Jonah tapped the bricks with the wooden handle of his adze. Most answered with a dense knock. A rectangle 12 feet wide returned a lower, hollow sound. The mortar was newer than the surrounding wall, but had been smoked with lampblack to disguise the difference. Near the floor, Lydia found a reversed brick stamped Hedden 1860. The Hedden kiln had burned down in 1862. Whatever lay beyond had been sealed while Mercy Bell still appeared in the accounts. They could not simply break through. If the wall supported the roof, a careless opening might bring down the upper story. Jonah drew a bracing frame and listed the timber required. Lydia listed its cost, £3 14 not counting labour. 9 shillings will not become £4 because you add it carefully, he said. No, but other people's 9 shillings may. In the front bay, she found a set of platform scales beneath canvas. The beam was rusted, but the weights were complete. By afternoon, she had swept a dry rectangle near the doors and hung a notice offering accurate weighing and accounts for boatmen, farmers, and coal merchants. Vane's company scales at the lower wharf were notorious for favouring the company. Lydia charged 1 penny per load and recorded every result in duplicate. Her first customer was Mrs. Agnes Pike, who sold potatoes, tea, and lamp oil from a barge tied below the lock. Agnes arrived more from curiosity than need and brought a sack she claimed weighed exactly half a hundredweight. Lydia cleaned the balance, tested it with Jonah's certified iron weights, and found the sack £3 light. "My supplier has charged me full weight for 6 months, Agnes said. "Then these copies may help you recover the difference." By sunset, 3 boatmen had brought coal sacks and 1 farmer had brought seed. The pennies were few, but each duplicated slip carried Lydia's name beside a number someone could verify. She was rebuilding a reputation in the smallest units available. Jonah returned the following day with 2 salvaged oak posts and his 15-year-old niece, Clara, who could climb rafters as easily as stairs. Lydia objected to a child on the roof until Clara informed her that she had been caulking boats since the age of 11 and would leave if spoken to like a teacup. Together they made the counting office weatherproof. Lydia paid Clara the same daily rate she would have paid a boy. Jonah noticed and said nothing. At night, Lydia copied the old ledgers. Tobias's entries were terse, but his method had an odd discipline. Each Mercy Bell charge had been posted against a different ordinary expense: rope, coal, timber, medicine, then corrected by a halfpenny in the margin. Lydia first assumed the halfpennies were checking marks. When she arranged them by date, they formed a repeating pattern of 1, 5, 12, and 7. Shelf, row, volume, line. The numbers directed her to a mildewed stack of toll abstracts in the upper office. Most pages had fused at the edges. Lydia separated them over steam from the kettle, working so slowly that one volume consumed an entire evening. At the marked lines, she found single words that made no sense alone: West, Mercy, subscribers, Spring. The fifth reference pointed not to a word, but to a missing page. Someone had cut it out recently. The exposed paper was pale, and a crescent of fresh mud marked the floor below the shelf. Lydia called Jonah before touching anything else. He followed the print across the loading room, where it disappeared among the wet tracks by the door. On the sill lay a thread of dark green wool. Vane's company watchmen wore green coats. "They know there is something here," Jonah said. "They know enough to be afraid of a page." The remaining references ended with a calculation. Tobias had listed the lengths of timber bought in 1861, 70 feet of oak keel, 14 knees, and planking sufficient for a narrow boat. No completed vessel appeared in the registry, but the dimensions matched the 6 missing feet within the warehouse and the covered space beyond the false wall. Lydia spread the survey beside the accounts. Her father had taught her that every figure represented a physical thing: a sack lifted, a mile walked, a day of a person's life. She placed the cost of each timber against the warehouse dimensions until the columns described not money, but shape. Behind the western wall lay a covered basin 72 feet long, and according to Tobias's accounts, something the length of a canal boat had never left it. The bracing timber cost more than Lydia possessed, so for the next 18 days the wall remained closed. Curiosity had to wait upon solvency. She rose before dawn, emptied buckets beneath the leaks, and opened the scales when the first boat horn sounded from the lower cut. At noon she kept accounts for Jonah and 2 coal carriers. At night she copied Tobias's ledgers, while Sarah stitched shirts beside the stove. Sarah moved into Bracken Wharf only after Jonah declared the office roof unlikely to kill anyone. She examined the narrow bed, the patched ceiling, and the kettle balanced on bricks. "I have occupied worse rooms with better curtains," she said, and hung her blue shawl across the cracked window. Work made the ruin legible. Beneath the plaster, the warehouse had good iron ties and oak joists. The north roof required replacement, but the southern half could be saved. Jonah showed Lydia how to test boards with an awl and read damp in the color of brick. Lydia showed Jonah that he had earned £6 less than he believed during the previous quarter, because 3 customers had paid him in irregular installments. Competence passed between them without either naming it kindness. Mrs. Pike used Lydia's weight slips to recover 11 shillings from her supplier. She told every boat family between Rookwater and Moss Lock that Miss Bell's penny scale weighed against rich men as honestly as poor ones. By the end of October, Lydia had collected £2 9 shillings and acquired more account books than the desk could hold. Vane answered by circulating a notice that figures certified at Bracken Wharf were unreliable. Lydia pinned it beside her scales. Beneath it, she posted the results of 3 tests, witnessed by Jonah, Agnes, and the parish constable. People came merely to see the quarrel, and stayed because Lydia's weights were correct. She also sent letters. The Canal Registry in Birmingham had no Mercy Bell. The county toll office found no certificate, insurance bond, or transfer. A clerk at the old mercantile bank confirmed that an account called the Rookwater Boat Families Relief Fund had once existed, but its early papers had been moved to an archive in Shrewsbury. The parish register contained a more personal fact. In the fever year of 1854, a woman named Mercy Bell had been paid 5 shillings a week for nursing among the boats. Lydia brought the entry to Sarah. "Your grandmother," Sarah said after a long silence. "Your father would not speak her name after the inquiry." Lydia had known that Stephen Bell's mother died before she was born. She had not known the Canal once paid her to nurse. Sarah remembered a narrow boat fitted with water tanks and medicine cupboards, built by Tobias and paid for by pennies collected from boatmen. Mercy travelled from lock to lock during outbreaks, cleaning wounds, boiling linen, and persuading families not to draw drinking water below tannery drains. Why was it never registered? Lydia asked. It was called a floating room, not a carrying boat. The company said that kept the tolls away. After Mercy died, they said the fund was exhausted and the boat broken up. Stephen had been a junior clerk then. Years later, when he questioned the missing fund, Vane's father accused him of misposting company money. Tobias believed Stephen should have fought. Stephen believed Tobias had hidden something and abandoned him. The brothers stopped speaking before Lydia was old enough to remember them together. "Men can preserve a grievance longer than timber," Sarah said. "Tobias may have left you the truth because he could never carry it to your father." On the first Monday of November, Lydia paid for the bracing. Jonah set 3 oak posts beneath the roof beam and joined them with wedges. Clara mixed lime mortar to close the opening afterward. Lydia removed the first reversed brick herself. Behind it was darkness and air as cool as a cellar. They took down 4 courses, then 6, until Jonah could pass through with a lantern. Lydia followed into a long, narrow chamber between the warehouse and the canal. The basin within it had been drained. Stone steps descended to a floor of black silt, and above them a timber roof concealed the space from the upper windows. A boat rested on oak cradles below. It was longer than the lantern light and narrow enough for the old locks. Dust softened its rails, but faded white letters remained on the bow. Mercy Bell. A small white bell had been painted beneath the name. The hull was oak, tarred and shrunken in the dry chamber. One plank had split from stem to waterline. No miracle had preserved it ready for use. It would need months of skilled repair before it could float. Even so, it existed. Lydia stepped onto the deck, only after Jonah tested it. The cabin held 2 iron water tanks, a small copper boiler, shelves fitted with straps, and drawers labeled for bandages, soap, clean linen, and dried herbs. A folding cot filled one wall. Beneath the benches ran pipes, with removable sections packed in layers of charcoal, sand, and cloth. The arrangement was simple enough to clean without factory tools. A water boat, Jonah said. His skepticism had gone quiet. On the cabin bulkhead, dozens of brass strips carried names and sums. Pike, 2.6D, Reese, 1s, Daw, 4s, Bell, 10s. Families had purchased no shares for profit. They had subscribed to a common service. The writing desk contained a log wrapped in waxed sailcloth. Many pages had survived, recording visits to crowded berths attended, fever cases isolated, and gallons of clean water issued. The final entries were in Tobias's hand. On March 18, 1861, he wrote that directors had demanded the boat and its remaining fund. On March 21, he drained the covered basin and sealed the arch. His last sentence ended halfway across the page. The second instrument remains where Mercy said the water. The next leaf had been torn out. Jonah searched the lockers. One iron compartment beneath the cot showed scratches around its lock. Lydia's smallest key opened it. Inside lay the velvet impression of a document tube and nothing else. Someone had reached the boat before the wall was sealed, or Tobias had removed the paper himself. The vessel proved that the company's story was false, but not that Lydia owned the fund or the spring named in the coded ledgers. Without the trust instrument, Vane could call the boat Tobias's private folly and the accounts his fraud. They had found the phantom. Its legal identity was still missing. Agnes Pike came after dark and stood on the stone steps with both hands pressed to her mouth. Her father's name was among the brass subscribers. She remembered Mercy Bell lifting her into the cabin when she was 5, giving her boiled water from a blue cup, and cutting a rag doll from clean bandage cloth. The memory had outlived every official record. "They told us the boat was chopped for firewood," she said. "My father stopped paying after that. He said Mr. Vane's father had swallowed the poor box whole." Lydia asked what Mercy might have meant by "where the water." Agnes remembered only that Mercy refused to trust the main canal. At each stop she drew from springs, roof cisterns, or sealed tanks filled above the industrial works. The pipes beneath the benches converged at a brass valve engraved with 3 wave lines. Lydia had seen the same mark on Tobias's survey beside an unlabeled strip of land north of the warehouse. The county map showed a spring there, though the stream had disappeared after the towpath was raised in 1864. Jonah dug beside the northern foundation the next morning. 2 feet down, his spade struck a stone channel. Its lead cover bore the 3-wave mark. Water trickled inside, clear at first, then brown when he disturbed the silt. The conduit passed beneath the boat basin and continued south toward the old lower berths. That week, 2 children from a moored family developed fever and vomiting. Then Clara fell ill. The doctor blamed bad food, but Lydia walked the bank with glass jars and found an oily film where families filled their kettles. A dye shed upstream had begun emptying waste into a feeder ditch. The Mercy boat's conduit drew from higher ground and could provide cleaner water if they cleared 30 yards of roots and repaired the broken settling chamber. Jonah estimated the work at £2 for tile, lime, and hired digging. Lydia had £3 11 shillings set aside for the mortgage. Spending it would not cure the sick children, and she made no such promise. It would, however, give the remaining families a safer source while the parish forced the dye shed to alter its drain. "Vane will have the building by December," Sarah said gently. "If you spend the money, he may receive a repaired conduit with it." Lydia looked through the office window at a boatwoman filling a pail from the foul edge. Numbers represented days of a person's life. Her grandmother had understood that before Lydia was born. "Then he will receive it working," she said. She paid for the tiles. Jonah organized the digging, and Agnes persuaded every able boatman at the upper cut to give half a day. Lydia recorded each hour and contribution. They opened the spring chamber, removed a mat of roots, and rebuilt the settling bed according to the layers in Mercy Bell's filter drawers. The parish doctor inspected the source and advised boiling, but agreed it was preferable to water below the dye outfall. Within 4 days, kettles lined the wharf each morning. Clara recovered. Her first act was to complain that Jonah had mislaid her caulking knife. The work cost Lydia her mortgage fund, yet it altered the way people crossed Bracken Wharf's threshold. They no longer came to stare at a disgraced clerk. They came for measured coal, copied invoices, clean spring water, or advice about a payment that seemed wrong. Lydia charged those who could afford her and kept a separate column for work owed by those who could not. The column never balanced, but the roof gained slates, the loading doors gained hinges, and Sarah gained a proper iron bedstead. On November 12th, Edmund Vane arrived with a surveyor and a constable. He declared the conduit an unauthorized interference with company water and ordered the public tap closed. Lydia produced Tobias's freehold map, showing the channel wholly within the wharf boundary. "A sketch is not an easement," Vane said. "Then you will need a court to decide." He looked past her at the line of pails and the patched roof. The ruin he expected to acquire had become a gathering place. That frightened him more than the boat. "You have mistaken sympathy for standing," he said. "The sale petition will be heard on the 26th. The constable would not close a spring without an order." Vane left, but Price remained near the carriage. his gaze fixed on the fresh mortar where Lydia and Jonah had narrowed the opening to the boat chamber and fitted a locked door. That night, someone tried the warehouse latch. Jonah found boot marks by the west wall and a smear of green wool on the new lock. In the morning, a formal notice was nailed to the loading door. The company claimed not only the mortgage, but £37 in unpaid canal service charges dating from Tobias's final illness. Unless Lydia paid or disproved them, Bracken Wharf and all its contents would be sold together. Lydia checked the service charges against Tobias's diaries, weather notes, and every receipt she could find. The company claimed fees for dredging in a year when the basin had been dry, towage after Tobias's horse died, and gate repairs performed by Jonah without company help. Each charge was false, but proving a negative required more than indignation. Fenn warned that Vane would bring company books, company witnesses, and a mortgage bearing Tobias's signature. "The judge may grant time for a proper accounting," he said. "He may also decide that a neglected debt is still a debt." The Mercantile Bank Archive in Shrewsbury had located 2 boxes concerning the relief fund, but neither could be examined before the hearing. Lydia sent the last of her cash for certified copies and continued working. She moved the Mercy Bell log and Tobias's 3 ledgers to Fenn's iron document safe. The decision felt timid until the night of November 19th, when she woke to the smell of lamp oil. Flame ran along the loading office wall in a bright horizontal line. Someone had poured oil across the shelves and beneath the scale platform. Sarah was coughing behind the curtain. Lydia wrapped her mother in a damp blanket and pushed her through the rear door, then rang the hanging crane chain against its post until the iron clamor carried across the cut. Jonah arrived barefoot, Clara behind him with 2 buckets. Boat families formed a line from the spring tap. They kept the fire from reaching the south roof, but the counting office burned. The high desk split down the middle. Lydia's clients' account books curled into black leaves. Her certified weights cracked in the heat. Then a second sound rose beneath the shouting, water striking timber in the sealed chamber. The fire had weakened a wooden sluice plug hidden behind the western shelves. Whether by accident or design, the plug gave way. Canal water forced itself through the old inlet and filled the basin around Mercy Bell. The hull floated unevenly for the first time in 22 years. Its split bow admitted water, one cradle rolled aside, and the boat settled hard against the stone, breaking 3 cabin ribs. By dawn, the fire was out. Sarah's hands were blistered where she had tried to rescue the cash box, and smoke had tightened her cough. The doctor ordered her away from the warehouse. Agnes took her in without accepting payment. Bracken Wharf smelled of charcoal and mud. Half the roof was open to the pale sky. The public scales were ruined, the office uninhabitable, and the vessel lay canted in 4 feet of black water. Lydia's income had disappeared 12 days before the mortgage deadline. The constable found a broken company lantern near the sluice and boot marks leading toward the lower cut. Vane said such lanterns were sold as surplus throughout the county. The dye workers said a green-coated watchman had been drinking at the Crown all evening. No one had seen the fire set. At noon, Vane posted a second notice. For public safety, he requested immediate possession of the damaged premises. He offered Sarah a room in the company almshouse if Lydia surrendered the keys. Lydia tore down the notice, then sat on a scorched beam and wept with an anger too exhausted for sound. She had believed careful choices could make hardship orderly. The building had shown her otherwise. Money spent on the spring was gone. Work owed by grateful people could not purchase a roof before winter. Even the phantom boat, once found, might rot in the water that had concealed it. Jonah sat beside her, leaving a respectful span of timber between them. "Tobias spent half his life refusing to open that wall," he said. "You opened it in a month. Perhaps being quicker than a frightened old man is not the same as being foolish. The court will not accept that as payment." "No, but 37 people came with buckets last night. That may be worth entering somewhere. Lydia looked at the wet basin. The Mercy Bell floated several inches higher at the stern than at the bow. A line of copper rivets, previously hidden behind the cradle, ran along the lower hull in the pattern of 3 waves. Jonah pumped enough water from the boat for them to enter safely. Behind the cracked water tank, they found a narrow copper pipe leading not to the filters but down through the keelson. It ended in a threaded cap. The compartment within was empty except for a strip of linen and a disc of slate incised with the number 3117. A poor hiding place for treasure, Jonah said. It was not meant to be the final place. Tobias's ledgers contained no folio 317. The boat log ended at page 204. Lydia spent the afternoon among the papers saved from the office, turning the number through every system Tobias had used. At last Sarah, resting at Agnes's cabin, supplied the missing association. Mercy used to say 3 cups of sand, 1 of charcoal, 7 of gravel, she remembered. She taught every child who came aboard. 3, 1, 7. The order described the layers inside the filters. It also matched 3 masons' marks Lydia had copied from the stone channel, 3 waves at the warehouse, 1 at the settling chamber, 7 at the springhead on Tobias's survey, where Mercy said the water must begin. The spring rose on a wooded bank half a mile north, beyond a collapsed stone wall. Lydia, Jonah, Agnes and Fen went there at first light. The old catchment basin was roofed with slabs and buried beneath leaf mold. 7 chisel strokes marked the inner lintel. Behind it, a dressed stone moved when Jonah drove in 2 wedges. The cavity held a lead tube, sealed with wax and pine resin. Inside, dry and intact, lay a folded deed, a subscriber roll, 3 bank certificates, and a letter addressed to Stephen Bell. The deed was dated 1856. Mercy Bell, Tobias Bell, Stephen Bell, and 2 boatmen had declared the £1,200 collected by Canal families to be a relief trust. The money purchased the Mercy Bell, equipped her as a mobile water and nursing station, and acquired Bracken Wharf with a perpetual right to draw from the upper spring. The company had agreed to pay 4% annual interest on the remaining capital in exchange for its use. If the boat ceased service, the assets were to remain for the health and relief of families living and working on the Rookwater Canal. The bank certificates carried embossed seals and numbers. The subscriber roll matched the brass names in the boat cabin. The document did not make Lydia wealthy. It made the warehouse, spring rights, vessel and debt the property of a trust whose beneficiaries still lived along the water. Fen read the deed twice. If the signatures are confirmed and the bank records agree, the company owes the trust considerably more than your mortgage. Mr. Vane cannot foreclose on property his company may have no right to encumber. The letter explained what law alone could not. After Mercy's death, Vane's father proposed taking the relief capital into the general company account. Stephen objected. Tobias hid the boat, while Stephen kept working inside the company to trace the money. Each believed the other had chosen cowardice. When Stephen was accused, Tobias possessed the trust deed, but not the company clearing ledger needed to prove the diversion. He feared that producing one without the other would let Vane destroy both. He waited too long. Stephen died, believing his brother had abandoned him. Tobias's letter asked forgiveness from a dead man. Its final paragraph named Lydia. She has Stephen's patience with figures and Mercy's refusal to treat suffering as someone else's account. If she ever sees the clearing books, she may find what I could not. Do not give her the answer. Give her what survived, and let the truth be proved rather than inherited. Lydia folded the letter without speaking. Tobias had not been a wise guardian, waiting nobly for the right hour. He had been afraid, stubborn, and late, yet he had preserved the boat, the deed, and the possibility that Stephen's name could be cleared. The legacy contained love, damaged by silence, as surely as the warehouse contained timbers, damaged by rain. They carried the papers directly to Fen's safe. That evening, Lydia reconstructed the company account on Agnes's table. The 68 £12 charges were interest payments owed to the trust, disguised as storage fees to make them appear as operating expenses. In the final company ledger, the one removed from the quarterly meeting, the payments should have entered a trust account. Instead, they had been transferred through 3 false freight accounts, controlled by Vane and Price. The new service charges against Bracken Wharf repeated the same trick. Their total, £37, equaled the last 3 quarters of diverted interest, plus £1 in filing costs. Vane was trying to make the trust pay a fragment of the money he had taken from it. At 10 that night, Martin Price knocked on Agnes's cabin roof. His left cheek was bruised. He carried the missing page from Tobias's toll, abstract, and a bundle of memoranda signed by Vane. Price admitted cutting the page before Lydia took possession. Vane had ordered him to find the spring instrument and promised to protect him if the fraud was discovered. That morning, Vane had prepared a statement blaming every false transfer on Price alone. "You helped him accuse me," Lydia said. "Yes, and you will say so under oath." He asked whether that would save him. "No," Lydia said. "It may save the truth. You will answer for the rest." Price surrendered the memoranda to Fenn and slept under the constable's watch. Among them was a payment authorized by Vane for 2 company watchmen to perform urgent basin clearance on the night of the fire. The next morning, Lydia entered the court with no roof, no scales, 11 days of cash, and a case Vane no longer controlled. The hearing was held in the assembly room above Rookwater's Market Hall because the ordinary courtroom could not contain the shareholders, boat families, tradesmen, and reporters who arrived before the doors opened. Vane sat at the claimant's table in mourning black dignity. He had dismissed Price and denied knowing where he had gone. Vane's solicitor began with the mortgage. Tobias's signature was genuine. The principal had not been repaid. The fire, he argued, proved the warehouse unsafe and made immediate sale necessary. Whatever quaint vessel Miss Bell claimed to have found was an abandoned chattel of no value. Fenn did not ask the judge to accept a family story. He produced the spring deed, the certificates, and the subscriber roll. A bank archivist from Shrewsbury laid a certified copy of the 1856 trust beside the original. The seals, numbers, and signatures matched. A second archived letter confirmed that the company had received the £1,200 on terms requiring quarterly interest. The mortgage had been granted against trust property without the beneficiary's consent. Fenn requested that the sale be stopped until the court determined whether it was valid and what the company owed. Vane rose before his solicitor could prevent it. The fund was exhausted on a vessel that never entered service. "Then why did your company pay for its berth 68 times?" Lydia asked. The judge warned her not to interrupt, but the question remained in the room. When Lydia was called, Vane's solicitor tried to reduce the matter to her dismissal. Had she not entered the disputed company figures? Had she not carried bank packets? Had her own uncle not concealed a boat and falsified storage accounts? Lydia answered each question with a date, a folio, and a witness. Then Fenn placed a slate board on an easel, and she drew 4 columns. In the first, she entered the original trust capital. In the second, the required quarterly interest. In the third, the Mercy Bell charges. They matched for 17 years without a penny's variation. In the fourth, she entered the 3 freight accounts to which the money had been transferred. "Storage varies," she said. "Interest does not." Those entries concealed a debt payable to the boat families. The false freight accounts concealed where Mr. Vane sent it afterward. Vane claimed the clearing ledger had been lost. Price stood at the rear, under the constable's watch, and said it was locked inside the lower drawer of Vane's private deed cupboard. The judge ordered the cupboard sealed and its contents delivered to an independent accountant. Fenn then produced the memorandum for urgent basin clearance. Vane denied under oath that the words authorized work at Bracken Wharf on the night of the fire. Price identified his handwriting. Jonah identified the names of the two watchmen. Clara, pale but steady, testified that she had seen one of them carrying company oil tins toward the upper cut before midnight. The constable placed the broken lantern on the evidence table. The hearing did not end with a theatrical confession. Vane continued denying everything until his solicitor stopped asking questions. The judge stayed the sale, barred the company from entering Bracken Wharf, and ordered a full accounting. The magistrates directed the constable to detain Vane while the fire and false transfers were investigated. Price was charged as well. He had chosen to testify, but cooperation did not erase what he had done. Outside, boat families filled the market steps. Some cheered when Lydia emerged, others merely touched their caps. Alderman Say passed without meeting her eyes. No apology returned her lost wages or repaired Sarah's hands. Yet the company's accusation was no longer the only public record. The independent accounting lasted 4 months. It confirmed that Lydia's disputed entries had been made under Vane's written instructions, and that Stephen Bell had objected to the same diversion 22 years earlier. Notices clearing both names were posted at every company office where Lydia's disgrace had appeared. At the spring assizes, Vane was convicted of fraud and conspiracy to damage the wharf. His position, house, and controlling shares were sold to satisfy creditors and the trust. Price pleaded guilty to false accounting and received a lesser sentence after returning documents and giving evidence, but he never worked on the Rookwater books again. The two watchmen admitted opening the sluice and setting the office fire on Vane's order. The court did not award Lydia a fortune. After legal costs and the company's other debts, the Relief Trust recovered its £1,200 of capital and £684 of unpaid interest. Tobias's will, read together with the original deed, named Lydia as his successor trustee, subject to approval by the beneficiaries. They elected Agnes Pike and 2 boatmen to serve beside her. Lydia accepted a modest salary as secretary and accountant. The unauthorized mortgage was cancelled, and the warehouse remained bound to the purpose for which Mercy had acquired it. That purpose required budgets, not celebration. Before a shilling went to the boat, a surveyor condemned the northern roof and 20 feet of the west parapet. The trustees spent £140 on masonry, slate, drainage, and an iron fire door. Jonah supervised the work and submitted every invoice to Lydia, including one for a pencil he claimed she had worn out correcting him. The Mercy Bell required more. Her split bow was replaced, 4 hull planks renewed, and the cabin ribs steamed back into shape. The tanks were cleaned and retinned. A physician and sanitary engineer inspected the filters and altered them where later knowledge had improved upon Mercy's design. No one pretended an old arrangement was safe merely because it was beloved. Clara entered a formal boat-building apprenticeship and carved her initials beneath a new deck beam beside Tobias's old mark. For 14 months, the vessel remained in the basin while work progressed as money allowed. During that time, Bracken Wharf earned its keep. New certified scales stood beneath the crane. Lydia and 2 clerks kept accounts for independent carriers at published rates. The spring tap supplied water inspected by the parish, while the trust paid to extend a covered pipe to the lower berths. Sarah organized a linen room where boatwomen could wash bandages and buy soap at cost. Upstairs, a teacher held 3 evening lessons each week for children whose homes moved with the trade. Not everyone admired the change. A coal merchant refused to use Lydia's scales because a woman had certified them. A shareholder insisted the trust should lease the warehouse for private profit. Lydia entered their objections in the minutes, as carefully as every vote in her favor. The place did not need universal affection to be useful. In May 1885, the repaired loading office opened. Jonah carried in a new high desk made from smoke-darkened pieces of the original. One drawer bore a brass label, "Accounts that must not vanish." "Too sentimental?" he asked. Entirely, Lydia said, and kept it. Sarah's cough eased in the dry rooms. Agnes served tea beside the public tap. Clara's wages rose with her skill. Lydia paid rent to the trust for the steward's rooms above the office and discovered that a home could be both earned and shared. On Sundays, when the warehouse was quiet, she sometimes read Tobias's letter. She did not forgive his long silence all at once. She allowed the repaired building to teach her that preservation and repair were different acts. The Mercy Bell was relaunched on a clear September morning. No bunting concealed the patched brickwork, and no polished dignitary claimed credit. Jonah knocked away the final wedges while children crowded the towpath. The boat slid from the basin into the upper cut, sat low for one anxious moment, then rose level on the water. Her brass subscriber strips had been cleaned but not replaced. Old names remained beside small gifts of 1 shilling and 6pence. New strips were added below them for the people who had carried buckets during the fire and given labor during the repairs. The cabin held clean water tanks, first aid supplies approved by the doctor, folded linen from Sarah's room, and account forms Lydia had designed so that every contribution and expense could be inspected. At the reopened upper lock, the toll-keeper pushed the register toward Lydia. For more than 2 decades, no official book had admitted that the vessel existed. Lydia dipped the pen and wrote slowly enough for the children leaning over the counter to read. Mercy Bell, owner, Rookwater Boat Families Relief Trust, service, water and nursing supplies. She sanded the ink, closed the book, and watched the Mercy Bell move into open water under her own recorded name.